In 1559, Sofonisba is invited to go to Spain as a lady-in-waiting and a court painter to the new queen, Isabella de Valois. So, what a perfect, she has a career, essentially. And it's wonderful because she can be both the aristocratic presence. She is Castiglione's lady of the palace, the female courtier, lady-in-waiting. And she also is a court painter to the queen, which is particularly nice because a female, they have the queen can be taught and can be painted by a female. How very respectable. Incidentally, she is said to have taught the queen painting, and the queen really enjoyed this. So she was participating in this new accomplishment that was now becoming very respectable for women, at least in court circles. And the queen regarded Sofonisba as a very good friend, evidently, too. So here we see one of Sofonisba's portraits of the queen. And she remained in the court of Spain from 1559 to 1573. She taught the queen to paint. She was extremely well paid. And what she was able to do was send money back to help the family out. So she was not only supporting herself, she was actually able to help the family. And in fact, later in life, she actually signs over her pension to her brother. To help because she's got enough otherwise, evidently. The queen died in childbirth, and this was in 1568, and she left a very nice legacy to Sofonisba Anguissola. Now, the legacy wasn't paid immediately. The king kept it for a while and then paid it out as a dowry. Now, we're thinking here, if she was born in 35, and this is 73, and she might even be older than that. So she's certainly at least in her upper 30s when she finally gets married. That's very unusual. Generally, women get married when they're teenagers. And so, to be married that late in life for the first time, obviously wealthy widows get married if they want to. But that's a little unusual. And Philip II, the King of Spain, arranges the marriage. He's married. She is married. She doesn't even meet him until she moves to Palermo. And so it's a marriage by proxy. She's married to Fabrizio Moncada, who is the younger son of the Viceroy of Sicily, who's and she lives with him for about 5 years until he dies. And then she's going back to Cremona, and she meets the captain of the ship, who's a Genoese ship captain. His name is Orazio Lomellini. And this is from a very fine Genoese family, so it's not some rustic ship captain. This person is also from a noble family in Genoa, and she marries him. She marries him over the protests of her brother, who by this time is the head of the household, and he's inherited. And he does not really like this idea of his sister marrying and probably taking some of her money to her husband. He probably thought the family was going to get it all. But at any rate, that becomes very fascinating. I don't know why no one has written some kind of romantic novel about it. Of course, we know nothing about it. But he is younger than she is, and by this time, she's in her 40s. Maybe she's feeling like she can do what she wants. She lives to be a very old woman. And we have this portrait, which some people call a self-portrait of Sofonisba, and other people question whether it is by her hand. So I don't know. Depends on what book you're reading. But you can see this portrait in her old age, about 1610, and she lives to be in 1625, so she does live to be perhaps 90 years old or even more. I mean, As I said, we aren't sure of her birthday. In 1606, she transferred her Spanish pension to Asdrubale to help out the family. And that indicates that she had plenty of money on her own. She's quite well known. In 1624, she's visited by Anthony van Dyck, who draws a sketch of her, and I have just reproduced down below. You can see the writings going across the page, and he just does a little sketch in the middle of this, of her at a very old age. And then the following year she dies, as we say, is advanced old age, but well known. Okay, let's go back, and now we know about her life, let's go back and look at some of her works of art. And one of the interesting things about this, of course, is the strategies by which women are able to become known and to be able to have a career. And I want you to be kind of aware of that throughout the course. This is a drawing, a boy bitten by a crayfish, or sometimes they'll say a boy bitten by a crab, some kind of crustacean. And I've seen all sorts of dates on it, but it seems to me that it's fairly easy to date. Because we know who the boy is. The boy is Asdrubale. And maybe I should say a few words about the names of the family members. The names of the family members, as you can see, some of them are quite unusual. They are often they're Carthaginian names. Her grandfather, the first to be made noble, was Annibale, or Hannibal. So they're naming the boys after the brothers and sons of Hannibal, those Carthaginian names, and Sofonisba was the daughter, I think, of Hannibal, or one of the Carthaginians anyway. And then a lot of the names of the girls are classical. I mean, obviously Sofonisba is from classical history. Helena, Helen. Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom. Europa. And then a few of them, Lucia and Anna Maria, are much more conventional saints' names. But it is kind of interesting because even the names he picks for his children have an intellectual, educated history behind them. Okay, back to the painting, back to the drawing. As we said, Almaquire, her father, would write to various people, telling them about his daughter's accomplishments and sending them drawings. And one of the things he did was send a drawing to Michelangelo. And it was a drawing of a smiling girl. And Michelangelo writes back and he says, well, this is very well done. And then he says, well, he kind of gives her an assignment. He said, but why don't you draw a crying boy? Because, that's harder. I'm not quite sure why it's harder. I actually think that smiling is often harder than drawing crying. And is the implication that, boys are more important than girls? This is one of the things people have mused over. However, she complies, and she gives him a very unusual drawing. And it still survives. As you can see, it's somewhat damaged, but it still survives. It's unusual because it's an everyday subject. She didn't just draw some amorphous crying, she didn't just draw some anonymous crying boy out of context, or she didn't pick a classical theme. What she does is show everyday life. And it is her brother, Asdrubale. Now, I have seen dates on this drawing anywhere from 1554 to 1558. And I sometimes think, well, I think possibly one of the reasons they like to put late dates is to try to say, oh, she's much older. It's that old idea that somehow, men can be accomplished in their teens, in their 20s, but maybe not women. I don't know where the logic of that is, actually. But we can date this pretty easily. Asdrubale is born in 1551. He looks about 2.5 to 3 years old, so presumably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1554. And what you can see is that the little boy has stuck his hand into a basket of crustaceans, crayfishes that have little pinchers on them. And he's gotten pinched. He's gotten, his hand is up and dangling from it is one of these little crayfish. And he's crying. And his sister, Minerva or Europa, probably one of the sisters, is patting him on the back and trying to comfort him. And kind of smiling because, you know, it's slightly amusing, but it's more, I think it's more a comforting smile. And it's interesting what people say about it, because I have seen people say that she's laughing at him. I don't see that at all. I see her as comforting him. There's another interesting thing about this drawing. It got passed to some pretty illustrious people, and it's believed that Caravaggio somehow saw it, or at least heard of it, and does a painting of a boy bitten by a lizard, and that idea may go back to the Anguissola picture. So Caravaggio is probably one of the most famous Baroque painters, and from about 1600. And so when you say that, I always think this is one of the criteria that people use to say an artist is important or great, is that did they influence anybody? So here we do see an influence on a major artist. Now, she did many, many, many self-portraits. We're not going to see them all, but we're going to see some of them. This is a self-portrait of Sofonisba Anguissola. It's a very small picture. It's only about 17¼ by 5 inches, so a little bit over a postcard size. And it's in Vienna, in the Kunsthistorische Museum. I have seen this work. And one of the things that I noticed immediately was you could so clearly make out the text in the book that she's holding. And the book is inscribed, as you can see. I've got the inscription there, in Latin. And I want to talk about the inscription. Now, it's a little hard to tell in the reproduction because sometimes dark colors reproduces as black. But the background is really a deep green. And she's wearing then a dark dress. And so this sets her out against the background. She's not really lost in the background. But it's a very modest dress. As you can see, it comes right up to her neck. And then she has the little frill at the neck and at the cuff. So it's not a completely plain dress. She's got some touches that you'd have to have some money to wear. This very, very fine ruffles. But it's a simple setting, it's a modest dress, and that just really reinforces the words on the inscription, where she says that she's Sofonisba Anguissola Virgo meaning virgin or maiden. And often they put this word in, and it is emphasizing the fact that they are young, chaste, virtuous maidens. Even if her portrait is there for you to see, she's still virtuous. Even though she paints, she's still virtuous. And it is something that is very, very important for the woman artist to combat any thought that because her portrait or her skills are being displayed, that somehow she could be wanted. And as I say, the women from the nobility generally have a good chance of doing this because they are chaperoned and they are of the social class that just some ordinary person on the street should not be making comments about. So here we see again, and in a sense, these self-portraits, they were popular. People wanted to have pictures of this remarkable woman. Some of them are for her family, undoubtedly. Some are for herself and demonstrations of her skill. After all, she has a ready model in herself and her family, and her earliest pictures are mostly herself and her family. We know, for example, later on, Lavinia Fontana, another woman artist of the 16th century, the people are asking for her portrait so they can put them in their studios with their portraits of famous men and women. So one of the suggestions has been is these are gifts that Almackari could give to important people to help enhance Sofonisba's career, where some of them probably stayed in the family too. Here we see her even more obviously a painter. It's not just saying, I made this. In this case, we're seeing her actually creating a work of art. The self-portrait at the easel. And there are a number of versions of these. Some people think they're all by Sofonisba. Some people think they are copies after Sofonisba. One suggestion has been that perhaps one of her sisters, such as Europa, may have made a later copy. And we'll see one of the other ones as well. Once again, she's in modest dress. She's very calm and collected. She looks out at the viewer, and she looks very poised and very capable. She's in the process of painting a painting a picture of the Virgin and Child. And one of the interesting things, we said she usually is painting portraiture, but here, when you see that she's painting a Madonna and Child, that is asserting that she is able to paint religious subjects, not just portraits. It probably also refers to her piety. Once again, she's a virtuous young lady. And there's the Virgin Mother, and here the Virgin Painter, so perhaps a reference to that. Don't know that I've seen anyone say that, because obviously male painters who are not virgins are often painting Madonnas and Child, but when you have the juxtaposition, it might occur to you. The stick that she's holding, that her hand is resting against, is a maul stick. And these are used not only to steady the hand, but also you can smooth out brush strokes, and you often see these in pictures of artists from some from the Renaissance, some from neoclassical period. Oh, I should also mention that the picture of the Madonna and Child seems to have been perhaps something that it may be a lost painting, something of that nature. But it shows a very tender, loving relationship between Mary and the Christ child. Now, another idea that has been suggested is that by painting the Virgin and Child, there may actually be a slight classical reference to this, for those who are in the know. We remember we had these different women artists who were mentioned in Pliny, and then Boccaccio would talk about them and change their names. And they would be changed into sometimes, in this case, a sort of Christianized version. There was a classical artist, a woman artist named Timorete, who was famous for painting a picture of Diana of Ephesus. Now, many people have said that Diana, the worship of Diana of Ephesus for the Christians, was replaced by the worship of the Virgin Mary at Ephesus. And so when Boccaccio is writing about this figure whom he changes her name to Tamar or Tamari, it's as though he's updating the subject, to not a pagan deity, but to the Christian Virgin Mary. And that's certainly what we see in some of our pictures of Tamari in Boccaccio's Genealogy of the Gods. So I have this little 14th century picture where she's painting the Virgin Mary rather than the Diana of Ephesus. And she has her male assistant grinding pigments for her down there in the corner. So perhaps Sofonisba is likening herself to a female classical artist who is painting the female, can't say deity for the Virgin Mary because she's not a deity, but the most honored woman in the Christian saints. Here you see the picture we've been looking at, and one of the copies, and you can see it looks a little tighter. It looks like it is a copy, and it may be that is one of the other Anguissola girls. Maybe Europa painted this after her sister. We just don't know, of course. We've taken a look at this miniature several times, but now we're going to actually talk about it. It is it's assumed to date about 1556, and as you see, it's very, very tiny in size, and it's placed on a pendant that could be worn like a necklace. So this is a little miniature, about 3 by 2.5 inches. And the inscription would translate, and you can see it's she's holding up this big roundel. And there's an inscription running around the edge, and it translates the maiden, Virgo again, the maiden Sofonisba Anguissola, depicted by her own hand from a mirror at Cremona. Now that's interesting, and we wonder if the idea of saying it's from a mirror also reminds us of another female artist of classical antiquity. I'm never quite sure how you're supposed to pronounce the name. Ia. Probably someone knows better than I do. Who Boccaccio makes into Martia or Marcia, depending on your translation. And it is said that she painted her self-portrait using a mirror. So this is justified by classical antiquity to paint her own portrait. We also have some images of her playing the keyboard instrument, the spinet or the virginals. I think it's the same instrument, if not they're closely related. We see here that that this idea of using the spinet has a couple of meanings that she's reinforcing. One is the idea that, of course, she is accomplished in music, which young ladies were supposed to be. That was true. Before young ladies were supposed to be educated, they were also supposed to be able to play musical instruments, particularly the keyboard instrument that became known as the virginals, because young ladies practiced on it. So there's this idea that this is the proper task, the proper instrument for young ladies. She's not playing a lascivious lute, for example, which troubadours or people like that could be playing. She's playing a instrument that you would see in the household and that young ladies properly play. I have not seen this painting, but what the texts were saying is that the paint seems to be more fluid and her skills definitely seem to be improving. This is another picture of her playing the spinet or the virginals. And she's obviously a little older now, and that's where the date comes from, trying to figure out a date by the potential age of the person, the apparent age of the person. And sort of hovering there in the background is this face of this older woman who is much more plainly dressed. And we see her again, we'll see her again in another picture of Sofonisba's sisters. This is her chaperone. Our guess is that she might have been the children's nurse, and then as they grow up, she becomes their governess and their chaperone. But there is somebody with her. She's not all alone. She's supervised. And so we have, once again, that idea of this proper young lady who is very accomplished and above reproach. This is an absolutely remarkable painting. It has various levels that you can think about. It's a very sophisticated concept and definitely a mature style. It is by Sofonisba Anguissola, and it is a portrait of her teacher, Bernardino Campi, as he paints a portrait of her. So it's Bernardino Campi painting a portrait of Sofonisba Anguissola. So you've got all of these levels because the artist is painting a self-portrait, but she's doing it in the guise that her teacher is doing the self-portrait. So it's very, very interesting. Okay, we have a self-portrait within a portrait because, of course, Sofonisba is actually painting the picture, but she makes it look like Bernardino is doing. And Bernardino seems much more lively. He looks out at us. He's got another one of those maul sticks, which he's steadying his hand with as he works on the picture. What does this mean? Is it that, it's obviously paying respect to her teacher, and we know that she writes him. Sometimes he writes him, he asks for things, and she's in Spain, and she'll write back and say, well, but she can't do that right now because she has other things to do. So she's she's become her own person. But there is the question here: is that Campi is the person who created Sofonisba Anguissola by being her teacher, her mentor? And yet, it's almost like the tables get turned a bit, because when you look at the picture, your eye is immediately drawn to the self-portrait, the portrait of Sofonisba, which really Sofonisba has created herself, even though she makes it look like Campi's doing it. And she is a larger scale than he is. She's almost a kind of iconic figure because, of course, she's supposed to be a painting, so she's not going to be moving. So it's really interesting. There is a homage to the teacher, but there's also a display of her own skills, and it's a nice balance. It's almost like now I am more. She's larger than her painting teacher. So it's a very interesting painting, and it's a really unusual concept. I mean, you don't usually see things like this at this point in history and art history.